the vibe was pleasure graces were good at sex. I would have preferred if pleasure graces could give you like elixirs to keep your husband, or like perhaps your husband was not super well endowed and they could enhance, or maybe too well endowed and it needed a little.
Oh, that's not a real thing that happens.
Yes, it is. Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, Unresolved Sexual Tension. It's me, your host, Maria, and my ruggedly handsome co-host, William.
So rugged, so handsome. All right, and the book today we are doing is Malice by, and I'm going to edit it out, the silent part here where we neither of us could remember the author's name because that happens every single time. It's Heather something?
Heather Walter.
And this book was one that I'd had my eye on for a really long time. I had a friend back when the podcast first started recommend it, and it's just always been on the like, we'll get to it, and then a year and a half later, here we are, because the premise sounds exactly up my alley. Now, what would that premise be, Maria?
Sleeping Beauty, a la retelling, a la sapphic romance.
A la the main character is Maleficent, the bad evil witch.
It's one of those, the main character's the witch.
Yeah, no, it sounded perfectly up my alley. And so we've been disappointed by a lot of mediocre books lately. And so I started this book and I was like, oh, this is not great. And then for the first like 2/4, I was like, okay, this is like a middle school book. It's cutesy, like whatever.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, and then the 3rd/4, I was like, oh wow, the plot's really picking up. A lot of stuff is happening. And then the last 4th goes dark and like much more so than it needs to. And I was really surprised by that because for most of this book, I wasn't sure what we were going to talk about in this review because there just wasn't necessarily a lot of like material to sink your teeth into. And then that last 4th really mixes things up.
One thing I will say is that this book, from what I've seen, has a lot of positive reviews. A lot of people really like this book, and I can see why. There is kind of this, I don't want to say coziness.
Yeah, that's funny.
It is. It's kind of like this cozy, quaint cuteness to it, while also being not an ugly duckling, a black sheep story. Partially ugly duckling kind of vibes, and then like a friends to lovers romance.
And the world is like a little too complicated to really work properly, but it's like, oh, okay, middle schooler came up with this, like this fairy nation did this, and like there's actually a certain amount of internal logic to it as well. That like it's not my vibe, but listening to it, I was like, oh, okay, the tone of this is kind of fun.
It is definitely a vibe for the types of people who like this book, and there was a couple of things that kept this from being a me book. And it's literally, if a few things had been a little bit different, and what I mean by that is a book that I really, really would have enjoyed. Because it definitely has the introspective main character. The first 2/3 were kind of, or the first 2/4 were kind of slow. It's got a little like slice of life kind of vibes. But where it lost me was grounding me in the little details of the day-to-day life. Because I was trying to figure out why I prefer Spinning Silver so much more than this book. Because there's a lot of ways in which these are telling certain similar stories. One of the main characters in Spinning Silver is definitely marginalized. She's looked down upon because of her heritage. She has to deal with a lot of stigmas against her. Her life is very like money driven, mundane. You get her building an empire. And then this story also has a main character who is incredibly marginalized. She's like the last of her kind. She has a ton of preconceived notions she has to fight against. She is in a really interesting system of servitude that we'll get into. And yet for me, there wasn't enough of the smaller details to sink my teeth into before things start getting like really, I like to feel really grounded in a world before we start like shaking things up. And I didn't feel super grounded in this one. Will's right. There is a lot of internal logic to it. There are things that come up at the beginning, that come up at the end. The book's pace is pretty, despite the first 2/4 being a bit slower. For the most part, stuff is always happening and like there's a forward momentum to it. I also didn't I didn't dislike, it wasn't bad by any means. I didn't love the romance.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that because I expected to like it so much more than I did, and it made certain revelations about myself in terms of my interests in sapphic romance. But we probably won't get into that in this video because we don't want to be demonetized.
There was a sex scene, and it was one of those sex scenes where I think the sex scene itself was fine, but for me, and I don't know why, like, I can't, again, back to Novik, I don't know why.
It didn't match the tone of this book. Again, this book is very
Yes.
middle school of like, oh, I'm a middle schooler and I'm reading this. And then bam, we have a lot of discussions of certain anatomical places and viewpoints, and you're like, whoa, that was a lot for this kind of a book. It feels like, the author has written fanfic before, and it's been like fairly spicy, as they like to say. And then she just toned it down a little bit for this, but like there is this mishmash of like, this is too intense for the tone of the book up until this point, which I'd kind of settled into more of like a middle school.
Also, is it weird that I don't think it would have gone that well the first time? I'm really
Okay, I was gonna say the same thing. That shit is hard. I don't know that Aurora has the skills on day one to get there.
it casually mentioned that she'd been like she'd done some stuff with some pleasure graces, and she knew that she was into women and that she'd explored that side of her sexuality. I would have bought it. But we're given none of that. So I'm just like, listen, I do not think I'd be that good down there the first time, and I got one. Like,
That was my thought exactly too. Is I'm like, I don't think so.
that went real well.
Books and stories always have to do like they're ripping off each other's clothes and it's like that's never how it is in real life.
Yeah, the first time is always generally like you're figuring each other out. It's a little awkward.
It's so much more personable when it's like that than like, ooh.
Oh god, I'm about to mention Novik again. Like in The Last Graduate. That
Mm-hmm.
sex scene was so cute and adorable, and he like finished in 30 seconds the first time, and then they had to figure like that kind of stuff. I think I would have appreciated more from these two characters if they'd have been a little awkward, a little like
Mm-hmm.
stumbling through it, because I think it would have fit the vibe that both of them had. To have this big, swelling, uber romantic and sensual and incredibly successful round one sex scene was like, I don't buy it.
It doesn't follow from what came before. It's something I wish authors would kind of stop doing because it always kind of cheapens the world a little bit. And unfortunately, we've read a lot of sex scenes on this podcast somehow, so we know of what we speak.
So overall, I would say it's a decent book. I don't think it's a bad book. I think there's definitely some things that I have issues with. Some ways the plot could have been tightened up. But I can see why a lot of people enjoy this as a retelling and as a sapphic retelling. I think a lot of people like the dark, the villain retellings, and then having like a wholesome romance out of it. I just wish this villain had been a little bit, because I'm about that as well. I like that dynamic, but this villain for most of the book is not a villain.
That was my feeling as well in terms of like, I kind of felt like this was, we've talked before about how there's YA for young adults and then YA for 20 to 30-year-old women, kind of a YA. And this to me, for most of the book, felt like, no, this is YA for actual teens.
Like high schoolers.
Yeah, again, and then we don't get that fade to black. We get a little bit too much detail, and then we get like a lot of really dark shit. And I was like, oh, okay, this is meant for older people.
Grand Theft Dragon.
No. That is copyrighted. I came up with that during the Game of Thrones finale, and I've used it ever since.
I would really agree. I do think it is, because as a high schooler, I would have probably adored the shit out of this book. There's a lot of body issues and feeling shitty about yourself stuff that happens that I think young me would have. And then like when she's all powerful at the end and like crushes the people who teased her beneath her boots, I think a young Maria would have been there for it. But unfortunately, 30-year-old Maria is like, God damn it, could we not have talked? Like, could we not have listened? Like, my girl, you made a lot of mistakes. This is kind of on you.
Even down to something for me like the world building would have been when I was a teen. I've been like, oh, this is cool. And now I'm like, this is a little over thought through and a little overgrown, essentially. And it's not as quite as simplistic or elegant as I like now as an adult. So yeah, no, I agree. It's something that like I would have liked so much more if I found when I was like 15 or 18 or something like that.
I completely agree. I think it would be the kind of thing that I would reread it. I would have reread it a couple times years later, and then maybe read it as an adult and enjoyed it for the nostalgia. So congrats to all of you who read it at that age and who have really enjoyed it, or those who just enjoy it. You know, it's we have books that we tear apart, and I would say this isn't one of them. Did I love it? No. But I didn't dislike it. I didn't hate reading it. Like, I didn't have to be like, oh, I need to read the book. And we've had a lot
Yeah.
that I've been
It
like,
didn't
no.
it wasn't These Violent Delights or Lore, which were two books that were just like, oh god, can this end already?
Or The Trader Baru
Oh
Cormoran,
god, that was another one.
which a lot of people like, and a lot of people don't like our take on that book, but it's fine. It's we can't like everything, and we can't dislike everything.
All right, Maria, where does this book begin, and who does it begin with?
Our book begins with Alice, aka Malice. She's our main character. She's like 21, I think, like early 20s.
20, I think. The princess
20?
is 20, so I assumed
Yeah,
roughly the same.
like that kind of age, like not a teenager, but early 20s, but like just early 20s. And Malice, or excuse me, Alice is a dark grace. What's a dark grace, you might ask? Well, first I have to explain what graces are. In this world, there is the kingdom of Briar, and Briar butts up against the Fey realm, the Ethereans.
Okay, here's the thing, guys. There's so much info dumping in the first, like, quarter of this book. Like, there's just pages of her talking about shit and backstory, and I'm like, this is too much.
It doesn't have those tiny concrete details, because, like, Naomi Novik does that a lot. The first chapter of most of her books. There's a lot of fucking info dumping.
But no, it doesn't weave into the narrative here particularly well. It's more like she does a thing and then she keeps thinking about world building stuff while she goes to do the next thing. And so it's not totally boring, but it is. And the other thing is that basically the way Maria explained it is so straightforward. And really, this book would be better if it had just said, like, hey, this is the kingdom next to the fairy kingdom. And instead, there's all this stuff about queens and like the history of how they got here and politics that don't go anywhere.
A long time ago, the Fey Kingdom, I think they're Ethereans. It might be something else. It might have a D.
I think it's Ethereum.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
There was their kingdom, the Briar Kingdom, and then there were this evil kingdom of these creatures called Vila. And Vila were dark Fey, heck in bad times. And the Ethereans were like, if someone can fetch our stolen crown from the dark evil Vila Fey, we will make them queen or king of Briar and then give them good stuff. And then this lady came and she did it. Her name was Lithana. I will never mention her again, probably not, but she gets mentioned a lot, Lithana. She comes in on dragons. She was a pirate, it sounded like. She comes in on like a dragon ship, and she like gets the crown from the Vila. The Ethereans make her queen of Briar, and say only the offspring of Lithana can be the rulers of Briar. Here's a crown. If anybody else tries to wear it, it will kill them. It's got thorns on theme. The other thing the Ethereans gave the Briar Kingdom as a reward for this thing, and for helping them, there was a big war of the Fae where the Ethereans were like, fuck the Vila, we're going to kill him. And the humans were like, we'll help you. And as a like present for helping them genocide an entire nation of people, they gave them the Graces. And what the Graces are is humans with magic blood, because the Ethereans have gold blood and gold eyes, and they can do magic with like a staff and fae. But the Graces are girls born with party assortment hair, like pastels, garnet, blue, pink, like all that. So you know pretty soon, gold eyes, and their blood is gold, and they can use their blood to make little elixirs that do things to benefit people. So there's beauty graces. They can make you heckin' beautiful, change the color of your eyes, make your hair lustrous. There are wisdom graces. They'll give you advice on decisions you should make. They can also prompt you to make a decision. Like if there's a decision you know you should make, but you're not doing a good job at making it, they can help you make that. They can force you to make that decision, I guess. Some of the grace powers, especially the wisdom graces, I was really like, ooh, this needed a touch more fine-tuning. I'm not exactly like...
Do they give you a potion that makes you smarter? That's like what would make sense, but it doesn't actually happen that way.
There's wisdom graces, there's healing graces, there's pleasure graces, which I think this world could have done without. And maybe this is personal preference, but I did not like the idea of like
sex witches.
It's a weird thing to like. So do you use their blood as an aphrodisiac? Because the vibe was pleasure graces were good at sex, and people went to them for sex. I would have preferred if pleasure graces could give you like elixirs to keep your husband
Blue Chew, sponsor us.
and help juices flowing, like that kind of stuff. I would have liked that, or like perhaps your husband was not super well endowed and they could enhance, or maybe too well endowed and it needed a little.
Oh, that's not a real thing that happens.
Yes, it is.
That's a myth.
But anyway, instead they're just sold to kind of be like magic prostitutes, and I don't like that. And maybe that's just the way I read it, but that's kind of how it was pictured. Anyway, so there's pleasure graces. There's all these graces. There's a ton of graces, and they are highly regulated business. And there are grace houses. In the grace houses, they have different graces, so you don't compete. So there's never like two beauty graces in
There's
one
like a
house.
guild of graces, essentially.
Yeah, the graces houses compete against each other, but it's super regulated. You can only use your gifts and magic for money agreed upon by your house. You can't do it yourself. You are not allowed to favor anyone. You can't give any, like, you're my best friend, here's some magic. You can't leave Briar. You can't take a love. Like, there's a bunch of, like, rules. And the Graces are kind of like, yay, but also, ooh, we don't like all of these rules. And amongst this class of people doing heckin' commerce, there is the dog grace. And you might be saying, Maria, what the heck is a dog grace? It is not actually a grace. It is a girl who is half Vila, which were those evil dark fae I mentioned earlier. And she's just half Vilo. I thought the Vila were wiped out, Maria. Well, apparently not. There was at least one got through and had a child, and our main character was found by a fisherwoman who was like, this is a weird ugly baby, and they were like, it's a Vila baby, we shall do heckin' experiments and poke her and burn her, the Etherean ambassador, burn her
There
with
are
a
a lot of
staff.
flashbacks throughout the book to her being like experimented on as a child, which I would have liked if that had been put in closer to the beginning of the book, because at the beginning of the book there's a really strong sense that the author, it's that thing where they're like, ooh, racism, isn't it bad? And I'm like, I don't trust you because you're an author and I'm obstinate, so you need to be a little bit more nuanced before I actually am going to like cheer for the character and want them to do well. And so like that kind of like real cruelty I think would have helped sell her.
I also think it would have been better if it had been like a dream sequence with her remembering and it was told as if it was happening, because she's just like, I remember them doing these things and I remember the feeling of being hungry. And it's one of those moments where that could have been incredibly impactful if it had been told in scene and she like would wake up from dreams and it was something she had nightmares about. Because he is right, it is brought up, like, you're kind of told about it, but it doesn't start really coming up until later, and earlier would have been better. Anyway, the story starts and our main character Alice is 20-ish. She's the dark race and she doesn't do good things. No, her magic and her green emerald blood does no good things, guys. She does little baby curses. Let's say your boyfriend was looking at another woman too long and you were like, fuck that bitch. I am going to get a potion that gives her a giant wart on her nose, and then my boyfriend won't look nowhere else. So you go to the dark race. There's only one dark race. She's in one house. The fact that they are not the most successful or the second most successful house is fucking mind blowing. This, there's one. There's one bitch that can do curses and fuck up other people for you. You're telling me her house isn't the foremost house? I don't believe it. That economically, that does not make sense. Okay?
It's also just bizarre that they're like, everybody else can do positive ones and then she's the only one who can do a bad one. Why would they even let her work? Why wouldn't people immediately be like, no, it's a pox on the city?
This is one of those world building things that I did not buy. And it's one of those things that unfortunately you need to kind of buy into at the beginning, which is that the crown, the city, the Grace Council knows she exists and knows that she can curse people. She can take a once beautiful woman, and if you slip them one of her elixirs, they will become ugly. They will become bad dancers. The effects of her potions do wear off, but this is a wildly like terrible, like, why would you allow, I don't understand the motivation to allow this to happen unless it was explicitly stated that they knew it would bring in a lot of money.
That's true. There's a reason later mentioned of why she was kept alive versus killed, but that doesn't explain why she was brought into business as a dark grace.
I think it would have made way more sense if she had been employed by the nobility, like by the king and queen, to affect nobles that they were.
The secret grace, the
Yeah,
shadow grace.
exactly, like in that kind of way. I think that would have made more sense because you can just go to her and be like, my daughter's prettier than me. I want her to be ugly. Or like someone who's normally a great dancer, I want them to be a shit dancer. Tonight's a ball. Like it's weird that people were like, yeah, absolutely.
Also, because this brings us into the next massive part of Alice's character, she is disliked by everyone. This kingdom, very racist.
Racist.
Everyone hates her completely. They look at her with suspicion. Even people she interacts with on a daily basis are shitty to her constantly. She has three sisters, or not sisters, but three other graces. Laurel, who is a cool black chick who like treats her pretty okay. Marigold, who okay, there's Rose and Marigold, and I forget which one is which.
Rose is the bitchy one, and she's also the one. She's the beauty grace, and she's the one that takes blood rot. Marigold is just like sidekick bitch.
And of course, obviously, Rose was my favorite character in this book.
Unsurprising.
This book has a really bad problem for a while of like not like other girls, except like not like other girls asterisks except for the hot lesbian. Like there is a sense that like, oh, all the other girls are so pretty compared to me, and I'm just ugly and fugly, and I have like green pallid skin, and like I was like, I thought we were kind of past this. The book kind of does more with that later, but at the beginning it felt very high schooly.
I'm so done with like women hating women. Now, granted, is it a reality? Yeah.
No, I agree. We need to bring back men hating women.
That was also in this book.
No, I just meant as a social movement. We should bring that back.
At the beginning, I was like, I really hope they do something with Rose as a character to make her not completely dislikable. And they did. She does. By the end, each of the characters she deals with gets humanized a little bit. Like the madam of her house is kind of fair to her and the other girls, and it is only until later that she kind of becomes a bit bitchier versus like Rose, who is completely bitchy, and then like there's moments of humanity and humanizing, and you know, like they I will say this book passes the Bechdel test. Very rarely is anyone talking about a man ever.
I didn't like it.
But it does start very much like everybody is beautiful, and I am the black sheep.
Also, I'm sassy and like have comebacks to things, and God, do I like hate that kind of a character.
See, I didn't think she was sassy. I thought she was just like a little bit of a wet rag at first. Yeah, a sarcastic wet rag at first.
I'll agree with that. It was more like that. It was more like Elle from A Deadly Education, but obviously not as well written as the Goddess
Not
Notebook.
even remotely, and not as funny. Like Elle had a lot of issues, but she never seemed to feel bad for herself. She was like angry at other people, and Alice definitely is upset with her situation, and you get a feeling of like her resigned, like she's resigned to her fate, but she also like just doesn't like it. The book opens where the Princess Aurora is turning 20 and everybody's going to the party.
We should explain about the curses.
Oh, yeah. So the queens of this kingdom can only have daughters because there has to be a Briar queen. But lately, for the past few generations, the queens have been given all their power over to the men they're marrying.
Yeah, this book has a weird, like, semi-feminist, like, stance to it that doesn't really go anywhere. It's like, the queens are giving away their royal power, and it's like, okay, guys, it's an aristocracy. None of you guys deserve this power, so why am I supposed to care that one of you, one gender is getting it more than the other?
There's one moment where one of the characters basically said that, and I was like, yeah. That was like, why? I'm just born into it. But it also, like, I don't understand why they would ever give up their power. Like, it doesn't... I don't buy it. Anyway, the reason the women are so heckin' in love with their husbands and giving away all their power is because during the Fae Wars... right before the Fae Wars, there was this Vila who did not like the humans. And so the Vila cursed the Briar line and said, all of your heirs will die at the age of 21. And for a couple of years, this caused some chaos until the Ethereans were like, we can't undo the curse. But like the fairies in the actual Sleeping Beauty, we shall soften it. A kiss by your true love shall break your curse. Okay? Otherwise, and you have until you're 21. If you don't kiss your true love by the time you're 21, congratulations, you're dead. Sorry. And the first two heirs, because there's three princesses, the first two dead. They hit 21, they ain't never kissed no one that they loved. Done. Why you wouldn't let people actually fall in love, I don't I didn't like that part where like that 8-year-old was kissed by a 30-year-old and that worked. Like,
Okay, the problem is that this whole true love thing is like not ever explained or explored. So like, is it like a destiny of always of true love? In which case, like,
it's bizarre though, because there's a point at which Aurora notes that she thinks her parents were genuinely in love when they first married, and that it was the crown and ruling that soured them, and now they are no longer in love. That implies you have to fall in love with someone. So, how the fuck did an 8-year-old girl and a 30-year-old?
yeah. So if it's a bond, like if it works like normal love, then like why are they just shuffling people in and out all the time? Get like passing around herpes blisters. And if it isn't, why don't they do that then? If it really is just like literally, why doesn't she kiss every man in the city? Like it's an odd thing. And also, it doesn't make sense if anyone could be her true love, then it would come to a system where the husband would be more like of a paramour because it might be someone of low birth instead of somebody of high birth.
We'll get to the ways that you find out that they're actively not engaging with any of this, but this is one of those world building things that I don't think the author fully explored. Now, again, if this is for like high schoolers, yeah, you probably don't need to go into it, but this is the kind of world building shit I like some detail on, and I like a little more. I like to
Well, and make the book better.
all of these queens have married the men that broke their curses because they were so in love and they were heckin' so happy they weren't going to do a die. So they married them, and then they became. Originally, there was no queen, no kings. There was just consorts. Like you were a queen. You had lovers. You had babies. Lathana had multiple kids through multiple men. That bitch was not, there was no one guy. And also how piratey. That also, that's why in my head I like to think of Lathana as a pirate.
That actually is that's pretty pirate.
They've been marrying them and giving them up, but now, like I said, the two older daughters done. Aurora's the last one, the last heir to the Briar line. What will happen if in a year she dies? Who knows? So it's her 20th birthday. There's a huge party. They're gonna throw a suitor at her tonight. Hopefully, it breaks the curse. Everybody's excited to go to this party. Rose is like, oh, Malice, you can't possibly even think about going to the ball. Who would even want to see you? And Mistress Lavender is like, well, Alice can go to the ball if she would like. She is a member of this household. It does say the Graces on the letter. And Alice is like, yeah, I can go to the ball. And Laurel's like, you could go. You should go. And then Rose is like, who'd want her there? And so Alice does decide she's going to go. It doesn't say she can't go, and for once in her life, she's going to. And mainly what sells it to her is Laurel tells her it's a mask, which means her face would be hidden. So she could go with a sense of anonymity and have a good time like a normal person. Also, I guess I should mention, because I'm pretty sure it happens here, because she's super busy, Rose makes her go get the stuff from Hildy. And she goes and gets the stuff from Hildy. And she ends up breaking something Rose needed. Yeah, it is here. She goes to get something from Hildy, and one of the things Rose needed was robin's eggs. And she couldn't find any. Hildy was out of robin's eggs, and she knew, Alice knows, if she goes back without the robin's eggs, she's going to hear it. So she ends up going searching for robin's eggs, and while she's searching, she stumbles upon a giant tower, decrepit, falling apart.
Yeah, in the city.
By a cliff, and there's ocean. Whoosh, the waves, when they get real raucous, come and hit the tower. I don't remember why, but she just says, fuck it, I'm going in the tower. Her and her little kestrel burb friend go in the tower, and lo and behold, when they get into the tower, there is a man shackled by shadows in the tower. And she's like, who the fuck are you? And he's like, someone is here. It has been so many years since I have seen someone.
He had a very distinctive accent.
He did.
I couldn't place it, but
This is Cal. Cal is like a bajillion years old. He's been stuck in this, cursed to stay in this tower forever. Apparently, he committed a crime a long time ago, and he's long since paid the fee.
but he's under a curse where he can't talk about it.
He can't go into sunlight. If he does, he gets burned. He has to stay in the shadows. So he's just been stuck there. And it's been like ages, 20 years since he's seen another creature. And what you discover is the last creature he saw was actually another villa. And a villa that Alice happens to look a lot like. Indeed, it was her mother. And not only does she discover that her mother was like someone who was murdered for trying to break Cal's curse, but that she's also half shifter. What's a shifter? You've never heard of it prior to this point. It means nothing. It's not a huge, impactful point in the story.
I don't understand why it couldn't have just been rolled up into Vila powers.
Or I don't know why when they were talking about the Vila, they didn't talk about some of the other creatures that people.
Oh yeah, that's true. Because later they mentioned goblins too.
Yeah, like it all should have been mentioned at the beginning. Like if you're gonna front load your world building, front load all of it. Because again, this is a big revelation for her. Because shifters are also equally as vilified and hated as Vila, and now she's both. She gets real freaked out.
Cal, by the way, was a shifter as well.
He's like, I can teach you how to use your magic. You're not even dabbing into most of it. And she's like, oh, this is a lot. So she runs home. As she runs home, she breaks one of the vials in her bag, and flippin' Rose is like, you broke my thing. You have to go collect more. Meh, meh, meh. She ends up getting slammed with bookings the day of the ball, to the point where she finishes her last booking and everybody's ready to leave for the ball, and she not only is dirty and a mess, but she has nothing to wear because she didn't have time, and she figures out Rose and Marigold fucked up her schedule on purpose so she wouldn't have time, and she's all sad, and she goes to her bedroom. This is a bit of a Cinderella moment. She goes to her room.
Yeah, I thought so too. I was like, are we matching here?
There was Rapunzel vibes, like the tower, somebody trapped in a tower giving
Yeah,
Rapunzel
that's
vibes.
true.
There was definitely some Cinderella vibes. I guess you could say there's some Beauty and the Beast vibes. If you squint, not the kind of Beauty and the Beast vibes I like, but there were some Beauty and the Beast vibes. She goes to her room, and sacre bleu, Laurel has left her a beautiful dress and a mask. She changes into it. She gets a carriage. She goes. She enjoys people talking to her like a normal person because they can't tell she's the Dark Grace. She goes to the party. She's having a lovely time flirting with the guy. Then Rose comes, rips off her mask, stomps on it, and everybody's like, oh, the Dark Grace, you're so ugly. Oh no! Also, while she was at the party, she saw Princess Aurora, who's wearing a very low cut, like real down the back, like very.
And she's like, oh, how feminist of her.
Everybody's like, oh my god, what a daring dress. That Princess Aurora is a real rule breaker. And she like runs out into the garden, and she accidentally bleeds into a fountain, which, because if she puts her blood and stuff, it like fucks shit up. She bleeds into the fountain. The fountain gets filled up with mud and gunk and starts spewing mud. And she hears a voice who's like, I like it better this way. And it's Princess Aurora. Her and her do a heckin', they do a bonding.
Okay, here's the thing. Princess Aurora immediately likes her, and likes her like darkness and like ugliness and whatever, and like it makes no sense. Everyone else in the book has been 100% against it. Aurora is immediately for it. It doesn't even necessarily feel like, she's trying to be like cool and not like her parents, and she's a teenager rebelling or something. That could have been one avenue to make it a little bit more realistic. Later on, there are some vague mentions of like, she's always kind of felt out of place, but there's no like the two of them learning. The process of her learning to like Alice doesn't happen. She just immediately is like, I like fountains that bring up mud now for some reason.
And it's one of those things where I think I would have preferred it if she had decided to befriend Alice out of a point of rebellion, and then genuinely learned to appreciate her and love her that way, because it does feel a little bit like only you, like you're the, because it's one of two things. Either other people, like some other people besides Hildy, the shopkeeper apothecary, needs to be okay with Alice and who she is. I would like it if she'd been a little scared of Alice initially, and then realized her fear was misplaced. And if they had originally started talking and she didn't know Alice was the Dark Grace, and then finding out she was a Dark Grace and like being weird about it, and then growing to.
I think that would have made the book so much stronger. The thing is to have that as a process instead of just a thing that immediately happens, because it makes their whole relationship just feel very by author fiat.
Aurora is a manic pixie dream girl. She is. She's not like anyone else. She brings to Alice a sense of excitement and zest for life she's never had before. She's quirky. She likes weird things like moldy library books and running away from her guards and scaling things. Like she's a manic pixie dream girl.
And she's gorgeous the entire time as well, not a hair out of place.
Now, granted, I really liked the idea, and I wish the book would have
Oh
actually
god,
gone
I thought
into
that was
this.
so interesting, but they didn't go into it.
This should have come up. There's a point later in the book where Aurora admits that she doesn't actually know what she looks like. She's been so pumped full of grace elixirs. She doesn't know if that's her actual. She's like, I think my actual. She's blonde. She's like, I think my actual hair color is black, like my mom's was.
That was so fascinating to me, just in terms of like, not being at home in your body and it being separate from you, and the kind of body dysmorphia that can happen, and dysphoria, I think is the other word I'm looking for. But yeah, that would have been so interesting. And one of the reasons she says she likes Alice is that Alice is just what she is, which is sort of hilarious considering that Alice is actually a shifter and can just change shapes whenever she wants. But like, that would have been a nice thing for her to have discovered about Alice and her relationship to her, and not just a thing that was said later on when she liked Alice from the minute go.
I think that would have just been such a fascinating thing to explore. I also would have liked if we like if you found out what she actually looked like, you know? Like I wanted that. Now, maybe that happens in book 2 because there is a sequel.
Unfortunately.
It exists. But I thought that was so fascinating, and it doesn't go anywhere. They have the meeting. It is very pleasant. She goes home thinking about cool Princess Aurora. She goes about her daily life, and she eventually decides she's going to visit Cal again. Also, I should say this. She has her Kestrel Burb friend, Callow. Man stuck in the tower, Cal. I kept accidentally getting them confused.
I couldn't figure out why her kestrel wasn't a crow. That's from the movie. It's a crow. It's not a kestrel.
I don't think she was actually trying to go for the movie. I think she was just going for like
Yeah, maybe you're
classic.
right.
The dragon part at the end and the thorny brambles made me feel that was the moment where I really felt her hand was showing. Because prior to that, I was like, oh no, I think this is just like loosely inspired by. It's got a lot of fairy tale elements to it, but it wasn't until the end where I was like, you watch the Sleeping Beauty movie.
She's going full all in.
Yeah.
And so one thing I did like is that immediately right off the bat, she's like, Cal, are you my dad? Essentially. And he's like, no. And I liked that because I was like, is that going to become a thing? And she just immediately deals with it.
I was really happy. Weirdly enough, I was really happy that got dealt with immediately.
Yeah, I didn't want that to linger forever and just be like, oh, is it? Is it not? Or even worse, like him actually being one, and later on her being like, Sacre bleu, I didn't know that was going to happen.
Cal starts teaching her how to use her magics. She discovers she doesn't have to use elixirs. She just expected. That's how magic worked that she knew about, so she just fit her magic into that kind of system. But she has done things outside of elixirs, like her blood and water will just fuck shit up. She discovers that she has been actually like in moments of emergency doing tiny shifts, like making her lungs able to hold more oxygen when she's underwater for long periods of time. Eventually, she goes to the castle again. She's invited another time, and she like her and Princess Aurora start like, she's like, I'm so glad you came. I was hoping to see you. I'm not going to spend too long on the plot. But the basic idea is Aurora wants to break her curse. She is tired. She had to kiss a guy again. And it's not working. And she's had to at one point she's like, I kissed 50 dudes today. I'm tired. Because here's some things about this. Number 1, you're only allowed to kiss nobility. Commoners get fucked. Which is just a bizarre way, especially when you have the last heir to handle the situation. But never. You cannot kiss commoners. Number 2, only men. Even though this world is accepting of same-sex relationships and marriages, in the royal family, nope, you have to marry a man.
That was the oddest part. I couldn't figure out what the point of that was.
It felt like something for a feminist to rail against, for the sake of having something for a feminist to rail against.
That actually is very accurate.
Here's the thing. I would have been fine if it was like only nobility. Women, men, but only nobility. Because it makes no sense in a society where this isn't acceptable. Because here's the thing. Just because the person who breaks your curse is a woman, like, okay, you still have to end up with a guy so you have kids. But it just doesn't make sense in the world that they've built that this suddenly would become so heteronormative with the royal couple, especially since they have had paramours and consorts and like...
One doesn't organically grow from the other. It feels like, okay, if it's okay in all parts of society, then why isn't it here?
Because normally it's like the nobility can get away with some of that stuff, but like commoners are really... like, anyway... but it's a thing. And so she's tired of kissing men, and she's decided, fuck it, I am not going to live the life my parents want for me. I'm going to try break my curse myself, and you, Alice, you're going to help me because you have Vila magic, and Avila put this curse on my family, so I'd like you to help. I'm going to smuggle books out of the library, and you're gonna me and you are gonna figure shit out. And Alice is like, sure, I'll help you, absolutely. Also, while this is happening, Aurora's dad, King Tarkin, decides he sees Aurora gets upset about something and makes a rose bush go like super buff and aggro. And he sees it and he was like, you shall be a tool for me. He was like, I will pay you triple your normal rate and you won't have to go through the grace your grace house for it, so you get all the money yourself if you just work for me and do some stuff. And she's like, wow, King Tarkin's kind of like not great. But she's also like, what happens if I say no? Like, can I say no? I don't know if I have the power to say no. And she's like, but she has decided she'd like to leave. She's done with the graces. She's done with the system. Fuck it. Now that she's found Cal, she wants to learn how to use her magic, free herself, free him, and then they can use all the money from the king to hire a boat and get out of Briar. Because she'd like to travel and do stuff.
One other thing that will come up is that there is a Fey member at court called the Enderwild, who like is his job is to like
He's the ambassador.
yeah, and he was the one who was like super cruel to her as a child. He still thinks she should have been killed, but the king said, "No, I'm like we're not going to kill her." And now the king is like, "Okay, it's good I said that because I knew you could be a powerful dark.
I knew you could do stuff besides elixirs, and now I have proof because I saw you make that rose bush go aggro."
So again, it's weird that he was like, "I have a secret weapon, but now I'm gonna let everybody use her for $5." Like, why? If that was your plan, why wouldn't you keep her as a secret, Grace, in your like control? So it's one of these things that like it kind of makes sense, but doesn't quite when you think about it more.
So she's doing the stuff, and originally Tarkin sends her stuff like, the wearer of this ring will go blind. The wearer of this bracelet will have paralysis while it's on her, and she learns how to. Cal teaches her how to curse the objects, which is she just has to put her blood on it and have intent about what it's going to do. And she tells Cal about what she's going to do for the king, and he's like, listen, whoever he uses that on, it sucks, but you're not the one actively doing it, and if this gets you the money to get out, so be it. Fuck the Briar Kingdom. They were dicks to us. The Ethereans were dicks to us. Our kingdom of Meltair was wonderful and amazing. And there's this whole like histories written by the victors where the Vila and the shifters and everyone who lived in Meltair was like really vilified, but actually it was like kind of a chill, progressive place.
Also, one thing that should be said, especially as she starts learning about her Vila powers, the Vila are super OP. Like they can do anything. Everybody else is like limited a little bit in what magic they can do. They can just do anything. All she needs is like intention. She can unmoor other people's life force and just like snuff it out if she wants. She can undo their magic. I was like, oh my god, how did they ever die? That makes no sense.
And it makes no sense that humans, like the Ethereans and Light Fae, couldn't defeat them, but humanity was able to kill all the V. Like I don't buy it. Because literally, she on her own, at one point, King Tarkin is like, you shall be our weapon. And I guess maybe it's the idea that her, like, the Vila shifter mix is the ultimate.
That would have been interesting, but yeah, I don't think it's ever stated, and it doesn't necessarily play out that way.
And, like, you're telling me no Vila and shifter had kids before? Especially since we know Cal was in love with that. What was her name? Morgana?
Whew, I don't remember.
It was M something. We're going to call her Morgana. He was also in love with Avila back in the day. But their union was not blessed.
Another thing that's happening during this portion that I thought was interesting is that at one point, Alice decides to kind of curse Rose so that none of her potions work and stuff, and like it destroys her because there's a real anxiety among the Graces that like when they grow old, their grace fades, they lose magic, and like they're still taken care of, but obviously they lose the status from it.
All this stuff is happening. Her and Aurora's coming to visit regularly, pretending to be a patron of hers, paying to come see her.
They get into like dumb insecurity fights, but then make up.
Yeah, there's a point where like they almost kiss, but then Laurel walks in, and Laurel's like, "I see you have books," and like Laurel, you realize knows a lot of what's going on, but is keeping it to herself for Alice's sake, and you get the idea that Laurel does like Alice. she's not overly friendly, but it just the vibe is Laurel is not overly friendly to anyone.
Yeah.
But there's a conversation they have where Laurel's like, "You and Enderwild, you guys have similar opinions. You guys should work together." And she's like, "I fucking hate Enderwild." Now, granted, valid. He absolutely abused her as a child. But anyway, the book kind of culminates to a point where she discovers King, and this is the beginning of that middle that third no
Third, fourth.
the third fourth where shit like you're like, oh man, stuff's happening. And what it is there's a Grace trial. The Grace was discovered to have broken Grace laws. And normally you are like punished. If it's really bad, maybe you are taken to a very controlled Grace house that you can never leave and you work your like life out there. And this Grace, they gave her two charges, one that she said she wouldn't work, and two that she asked if she could have less patrons so that her power would last longer. And the idea is that was incredibly selfish. You know, we take care of our drained graces. Why would it matter? And she's like, no, but you don't understand. And like the king's a dick. Like the king is an absolute dick. And he basically, for these two really minor crimes, is like, we're going to bleed her of all of her grace blood.
And I was like, okay, that's weird. And no, it's not just weird. That means she's dead.
So they literally put one of the cursed items Alice made, and Alice is in the crowd. Everyone's in the crowd. Well, all the Graces are there. They put the thing that causes paralysis on her ankle, so she freezes. They put her on a table. They like put tubes in her and they start draining her blood, vial after vial of golden blood, until she starts bleeding silver. And then they literally just they leave the thing on, but they like push her off the table. She smacks her head. She's basically dead. She was drained to death. Like they don't even like keep her from hitting her head. It's super gruesome and it really weighs on everyone. Laurel is fucking angry as heck because you discover Laurel hates the Grace system. She thinks it is incredibly abusive. She thinks it's a terrible system and that they are basically like prisoners. And Aurora is also coming face to face with the fact that her actions, her cursing these objects, have consequences for innocent people. She decides that she's going to run away. She's going to take her shit and go because she gets back to her house and there's a box of brooches, and he said his request is that the king said these brooches need to cause death, instant untraceable death. And she's like, oh fuck. So she's like, I just gotta go. So she throws all of her shit in her bag, like 20,000 gold. It's so heavy she has to use her shifter magic to make her back stronger. And she runs to the tower and she's like, Cal, we're getting the fuck out. She tries to break Cal's curse. It doesn't work. She's thrown back. She hits her head. She's definitely not strong enough to go anywhere. And he's like, listen, just put your head down. And like, because he's at first, he's like, just go. Leave me. Don't worry about it. And she's like, no, I'm not fucking leaving you. You have helped me so much. You're like one of the only people who really get me. I'm absolutely not leaving you until I can get you out. I'm going to just stay and figure it out. So she goes back. As she's going back, Aurora's there and sees her with her giant bag of gold and was like, you're going to leave me? You're going to do me a heckin' abandon? There's a couple like fights where like they're not communicating properly and thus they're having misunderstandings. And this is one of those. Another one is that Aurora gets a new suitor who's going to come, and he's basically a prince from another kingdom. They're apparently like they're destined to be together as by the stars. And her and him have been riding back and forth, so they're not strangers when they meet. And she actually is having a decent time riding with him. He's got some good ideas. His kingdom has some good ideas. And she talks to Aurora or to Alice about how she wants to enact some of the systems he has that makes his kingdom a bit fairer. And all Alice is hearing is, oh my god, she's talking to this guy. She never talks to one of the guys. She just kisses them and then they disappear and I never have to worry about them. And heckin' jealousy.
I will say that conceptually speaking, it's kind of interesting to explore a character who has had so little affection in their life and is so focused on it to the exclusion of everything else, and that she would feel very insecure very quickly with Aurora, but it isn't really given that much depth to feel like a real character trait so much as it is like there's a certain childish aspect to how it's portrayed in her emotions that you never really feel like, oh, this is an aspect, she has this deep insecurity that we feel with her. It's just like a lover's quarrel almost.
Also, her and Aurora have been doing things to try to break her spell. One of the things they did caused her to see the Vila, this Vila who is the one who cursed the royal family, and she's like, oh shit, like, and because that lady was like, come find me, my pet, and she was like, I don't like that lady, I'm not doing that again. A couple days go by, Aurora goes home, and somebody has stolen Alice's 20,000 gold. And she storms in because she's like, someone's spying on me. It's Rose, it's someone. And she goes in and everybody's having breakfast. Mistress Lavender is there. And she's like, who stole my gold? And who stole my 20? And I don't know why she would give a specific amount. This is so dumb. But she's like, somebody stole my 20,000 gold. And Mistress Lavender is like, 20,000? That is an abnormally large sum. That makes no sense given what I pay you. Are you sure? Because that means if she had more money than she should, that means she's taking commissions and jobs outside of the grace system, which is against the law. And we literally just saw someone bled to death for doing something minor against the law. Never mind taking on extra patrons outside of the system. So eventually she realizes she has to back down. And Laurel also looks at her and is like, bitch, back down. Like, stop it. So she's like, oh, I must have, let me go look. I might have just misplaced it. Oh, so she eventually stops poisoning Rose's workings. Rose, being concerned by this, is now taking blood rot, which can, like, kill her.
It's a blood thinner, which theoretically makes her blood last longer, but obviously it's a blood thinner, so that's not great.
And she, like, helps her at one point. I liked the bonding with Rose. I did not like that at the end it all went for naught. And, like,
there is a thing where the book starts to make, Rose and a few of the other characters more, like, sympathetic, and then for what needs to happen at the end of the book, all of that is just swept back.
Because it becomes the Graces versus the royalty versus the people who are keeping them in the system for a period, and that is a really great. And then it's the Graces with their own personal secrets, like hiding each other's secrets, because everybody has their own secrets. And I really liked that fourth of the book. Again, the third fourth. Like, it works really well. Prince Elias is gonna come. Her and Aurora get into a fight. It's really dumb. It's about Elias. And she's like, you like him. And she's like, what are you talking about? And they get into a fight. They stop seeing each other. And this is after Aurora thinks she's, like, leaving. Aurora stops coming. Like, she doesn't come. Alice is super mad, and then there's the big giant party ball for Prince Elias coming, and people are so excited. The curse is going to break, the whole 9 yards. So Alice disguises herself to look like a normal, regular old Grace, because now she has her shifter powers. She goes to the ball. Prince Elias kisses Aurora. It doesn't work. It doesn't break no spells. Also, I should mention that at some point earlier on, the Queen threatened Alice if she got close to Aurora.
She's like, you're a bad influence. Stay away from my daughter.
Aurora was like, don't listen to my mom. That's dumb. The kiss doesn't work. Aurora, and there's what really upsets Alice is there's a moment of hope when Elias is coming to kiss Aurora. And it's hope at the idea of not having this curse and dying in 6 months. Like, it's very obvious that Aurora's not in love with this guy. She just would like to not be cursed. But Alice is like, so when the kiss from Elias doesn't work, the Aurora rushes away, and Alice is like, I shall find her. And she, like, bursts, like, a vase or something to distract people. And she, like, sneaks back, and she follows Aurora through a servant's entrance to her bedroom. And then Aurora turns around, and there's Alice in her room, like, hello, Aurora. And they have a fight, and then Alice is like, Aurora's like, no, the only reason I considered Elias is because I know he doesn't want to marry me, and I don't want to marry him, so I was just going to kiss him, and if he broke my curse, that would be it. I wasn't going to marry him. And Aurora's like, Alice is like, do you think that would have actually worked? Your parents would have allowed that? And Aurora's like, the only person I want to kiss is you. And Alice is like, what?
Me?
Kiss me. And then they come and they kiss, and then, like,
oh, no. They kiss, and then suddenly there's an explosion of sound, like an earthquake, like a snap of thunder. And you're like, yeah, obviously this was going to happen. This was going to be the true love. But they're literally like, was there an earthquake?
They go to the old library, because there's the new library, but there's the older, cooler library, because it's all, like, falling apart and the books are moldy. And that's where they have their night together.
And as we discussed, it's not anatomically specific, but it is very...
You know what's happening. Aurora kisses a certain place, and it ain't old Alice's mouth.
Aurora is great at it the first time. which
or had the thought to do it the first. This is why if she had casually, it's the Jon Snow effect. If she had casually mentioned earlier that, like, you know, she had, like, in one of their conversations earlier in the book, if she'd been like, I kiss all these men and I decided I wanted to kiss someone for my own benefit, and so I got a pleasure grace and I learned some stuff, you know, like, if it had been that, I would have been like, okay, Aurora, pop off, you go,
you
girl,
got
like,
some practice.
you show Alice how it's done. I guarantee you that bitch has never had an orgasm in her life. Alice basically says the same. Like that, like, evidently that was not something Alice explored in
I think
herself.
authors need to stop shipping their own characters so much because it's very annoying as a reader to read it sometimes. But yeah, that happens. It's super great.
They spend their night together. The next morning, they've been found. Guards are like, bang, 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 princess, come here. And they go to the queen, Queen Mariel and King Tarkin. And Queen Mariel's like, Aurora, has your curse broken? I knew. You went and found. She literally walks in holding Alice's hand.
Yeah.
Hand in hand, arm in arm. And her queen's like, oh, I knew. You must have gone and found a lass. And you must have had a night together, and he must have given you an actually impassioned kiss. See, I told you, Tarkin, that it was too chaste of a kiss. That's what did it. Aurora's like, do you see the woman next to me? It was Alice I kissed. Alice broke my spell. She is my true love. And everybody's like, no, that can't possibly be it. And then Tarkin's like, Alice, you're even craftier than I took you for. And then you're like, oh my god, why didn't she tell Aurora? I literally got to this scene and was like, you had so many opportunities. You literally
Yeah, it's that stupid thing.
walked in to an audience with her parents and you didn't tell her, hey, before, when I was trying to run away, before I'd fully come to terms with my feeling for you, your dad offered me something. I didn't have much of a choice, and I really wanted money to run away and travel. And so I cursed some objects, not realizing what was going to happen. And I have since tried to subvert. So instead of making the brooches that, like, kill people, she made them so it would make them sleep, as long as they were wearing it, unless it was pricked directly into their skin. But that's something you find out later. To try thwart Tarkin and buy herself some time. And she should have told Aurora this. There's no reason not to. Like, at all.
Aurora feels betrayed. She's like, oh my god, you would do all these things.
I forgot. The reason she was really fucking mad at Aurora when she went into her room was because she thought Aurora told her dad that she was going to run away, and that's why her gold got stolen. Like, why would she do that? That made no sense.
Why would she assume it was with Aurora?
Why would she assume it was Aurora? Like, you know who my first suspect was? Laurel.
Oh, it's interesting that your mind went there. We'll have to talk about that in a little bit.
Surprise, guys. Anyway, and Tarkin's like, yes, she didn't tell you. Alice has been working for me to for my plans against the Empire. Evil mustache.
Weirdly enough, him being, Grand Moff Tarkin, you would have thought he was with the Empire already, but
I know. I also, the entire time, I was like, Tarkin, that's the name we went with? Okay.
this part of the book is better, but there's a certain extent to which I'm like, oh man, this is a lot of politicking.
This conversation was wild because it goes about, like, Alice, you're evil, and then all of a sudden Tarkin's like, actually, in the same conversation, I'm going to confess that I am deposing the queens. You are no longer going to have any power. And she's like, this will never pass the council. And he's like, actually, the council members who were going to oppose me are currently fallen ill with an evil sleeping sickness. Thanks, Alice. You're a bro.
Also, I killed your two older sisters, Aurora.
Yeah, like, I purposefully, and you were supposed to die as well, but since you didn't, now you have to marry Elias. And everyone's like, what the fuck? And Alice is like, I won't be your weapon. And I tried to thwart you and not kill them. And he was like, yes, but, I figured out you. So immediately, if I was Aurora, I would be like, okay, she didn't know what was happening. Once she realized it, she started trying to thwart him. But Aurora's like, sacre bleu, Alice. You basically have a situation where three women realize one man has tricked all of them, fucked all of them. Literally, Mariel is looking at the man she married who broke her curse, and she finds out he allowed her two eldest daughters to die for his plans, because his goal is that when there was no more Briar heirs and they all died, that they would use that as a catalyst to invade Etheria, take over Etheria and all of its magic. And because, being one of the richest, most successful kingdoms in the world is not enough. You gotta want an empire. We are building the empire. Aurora's like, I'll never help you. And Alice is like, I will not be your weapon against the Etherians. And so I'm like, why aren't we immediately on each other's side? But anyway, Alice goes to jail. Aurora gets Laurel to help her break Alice out of jail. Well, no, just to help them. Aurora's like, I cannot break you out of here. It was hard enough just to get Laurel in here. And then Alice was like, don't worry. I'm a shifter, and she makes herself invisible. I also did not like that shifters could make themselves invisible.
Again, there's a certain OP-ness to the Vila shifterness that's just like, how did anyone handle them?
I was okay with you can make yourself look different because that's what shifter makes me feel, but invisible, I would have bought invisibility more if it was a Vila power. Anyway, it's just, it is what it is. So she's like, no, I'll just make myself invisible and you guys can get me out that way. And they're like, what's our plan to deal with Tarkin? Because there's a moment in the room when they were having that conversation where Alice nearly killed Tarkin. But Aurora was like, no, Alice, don't. And Alice went, okay, and didn't. And then immediately Alice got put in jail. And I'm like, why? Why didn't we just kill Tarkin? Everyone's life would have been fucking easier. But anyway, the plan Alice comes up with is that because Laurel is like, listen, the Aetherians will help us. And they're like, the Aetherians haven't helped the Briar Kingdom in years. And they're like, yeah, because the Aetherians swore to help the Briar Queens, and the kings have been the ones trying to communicate for the past few times. They ignore the kings because they don't view them as rightful rulers because that's not who they put on the fucking throne. And Aurora's like, how could I have been so dumb and never seen that? Like, I don't know, read the fucking... Like, it was very obvious to me that there was no way they would acknowledge the kings that they didn't put on the fucking throne. Anyway, and they were like, so we need to get Endelwild, get him to contact Etheria. They'll send people and we'll depose Tarkin. And they're like, we just need to get... Alice is like, I'll curse an object of his, and then we'll put it on him, and it'll keep him asleep, which will buy us time to get the Aetherians here. Just kill him! Get over yourself! Kill him! My madams!
She literally can just reach out with her mind and kill someone. It's not like they have to get within stabbing distance or he has some kind of bodyguard or something like that. No, it's extremely simple.
Again, she was this close to doing it earlier, saving us a lot of fucking trouble, but no, Aurora was like, no, don't kill my father. They get Alice out, she escapes, she goes to the Black Tower, and she's like, Cal, we're gonna get out, I'm gonna rescue you. But she also confesses, like, I'm in love with Princess Aurora and we're gonna be together. And he's like, why would you choose them? And he's kind of betrayed, and she's like, I'm gonna free you if you won't come with me and help me. Because he's like, let's leave Briar, let them figure out their shit. They fucked shit up on their own, that's their problem, let's go ourselves. And she's like, nah, but I will free you. So she frees him. Surprise! Cal has a tragic backstory and is kind of evil, but not really. Like, I don't know. I don't like this part.
The thing is that Cal, up until this point, has been very siloed from the rest of the story. She hasn't talked to him about him with anyone. She kind of goes off and does stuff with him, and then it comes back to the main plot of the story. She gets some powers for him, but not really. And so it feels like a weird turn for it to suddenly be like, but I'm evil. And he also starts acting really evil all of a sudden and doing a lot of evil laughs.
What you discover is, because she frees him, but he still has control of, like, the dark powers. Like, because the Aetherians cursed him, which she didn't know. She thought, I don't know who she thought cursed him, but I thought it was pretty obvious it was the Aetherians.
Yeah, I always assumed it was them, yeah.
The Aetherians cursed him because he and the Vila he was in love with were going for revenge against the humans. The Vila he was in love with, we'll call her Morgana, is the Vila that cursed Aurora's line and did their, like, you die at 21 thing. They were both banished to this tower, and he was wearing an amulet around his neck. And she thought it was part of his curse, but it wasn't. The spirit of the Vila he was in love with, her power is in that amulet, which didn't make sense because earlier you're told that the Aetherians are born with their power in their mouth and then they have to imbue it into an object.
Yeah, that was weird.
When the Aetherians die, their magic in that object can remain. So, like, if you bury an Aetherian in a lake or like by a tree, the tree will take on its power and it imbues, like, their power can live past them. Same with Vila's, but the Vila's magic is inside them. Like, I don't understand why hers was suddenly in a jewel. It felt like a world building that was brought up earlier, but that didn't actually connect or explain what was happening later. Like, it almost did, but it didn't enough to actually make sense. And he was like, you were supposed to help me, Alice. We were supposed to go together, but you chose them over me. Also, I'm evil, and I'm going to put Morgana into you. You're the first Vila powerful enough, and now she will take over your body. And he, like, smashes the amulet. Morgana's power goes into her, but Morgana just chills. Like, she's just there, like, I'll watch from the sidelines.
Oh, hey, what's up, girl?
And while she was getting stuff ready, like, she cursed a spindle to sleep. Yeah, she cursed a spindle to make Cal sleep, and it pricked him, but the intent was not to hurt him, so he just napped for a while. She didn't double check that he was restrained or anything. She just assumed it was going to last for a while.
It doesn't.
They hear a voice come, and you originally it was supposed to be Laurel. Laurel was supposed to come to the tower and like do the parlays and stuff, but then Aurora comes because there was no time to get Laurel, and she's like, "Oh no, Aurora!" Cal traps her in the shadows, turns into Alice, tricks Aurora to pricking herself on the spindle. And like Alice frees herself using Morgana's power, but it's too late. As she pops out and is like, "No, Aurora!" Aurora's pricked, and Aurora's not sleeping. Aurora's dying. Even though Alice's intent had only been for sleep, Morgana's intent had taken over, which didn't make sense because how she puts her intent on something is she puts her blood on it. She put her blood on this spindle before the I think it was before he broke the necklace. It might have been after he broke the necklace, but I'm pretty sure if it was before he broke the necklace. I'm not 100% sure if it was before. But in that case, he should have died because Morgana would have also, because the idea is she's dying because Morgana's intent was that the Briar Queen, the Briar line should die. But when she put the blood on, Morgana wasn't making that decision. And again, when she put the blood on, Hal just slept. So why does the curse change? Like, it makes no sense that the intent of the curse.
That's the thing, is some of this magical stuff is too convoluted to the point where I just actually was not totally paying attention to how it worked, because it's just, it's overbaked in that way that like a middle schooler planning out a story would be like, my magic system works like this and like that, and then it can do this and that, and you're like, okay, but does this tell a clean story?
Everything before has been like, you need to put your blood on with the intention, and then if the intention changes, you need to put more blood kind of vibe. And this, no more blood happens, but suddenly Aurora's dying. She ends up killing Cal. Like, just whoop, dead. Endelwild comes in. She's holding Aurora, like, no, don't die. Endelwild comes in and has been like, wow, this is a fucked up situation. He's like, I knew you were shit. You did kill the shifter, though, so you're obviously not terrible. And she's like, he tricked me, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, you didn't think we had trapped him here for a fucking reason? And she was like, but you were dicks to me growing up. And he was like, and you have turned out to be all the things I fucking feared you would be, which is not an excuse. In fact, because of how you treated her, that's probably why we ended up in this situation and a wild. So he's like, come with me. And they go to Lavender House, and he's like, we need to get all the graces, and we need to get healing graces so we can soften this curse and save the princess. They send Alice down into the basement. The next day, they're like, Princess Aurora is alive. And she's like, can I see her? And they were like, no, she's sleeping. She's under a sleeping curse. And she's like, no, don't worry. If I kiss her, she'll be fine. I'm her true love. And they were like, no, no, no. We specifically designed it so that your kiss would not work. She has to be kissed by a royal prince, and then she'll be good. Alice is like, why would you do this? And she goes upstairs, and she's like, what have you done? Blah, blah, blah. And they were like, no, she's going back to the castle. And she's like, she can't go back to the castle. Her dad's a dick. Who's gonna, like, why would they do this and take her away from me? So she decides, fuck it. Like, Rose says something nasty to her, and she, like, because she hears Morgana in her head being like, show them how powerful you are. And she's like, she transforms herself in front of them with her shifter powers. And she was like, my whole life you've told me I was a monster and terrible. Just watch how much of a monster I can be. Crash, crash, evil, evil.
I should say, this is like kind of fun, because you do, at this point, you have finally been like, okay, people have been treating her like shit. So it is cathartic to see her just go like, I'm losing control and this is cool.
And this part I liked. I liked her being like, I'm a shifter. Fuck you gonna do about it? Try me, bitches. I like that. That was a cool scene. And she yells at Mr. Stoppinger. But anyway, so she goes to the castle. She sneaks in. She goes to Aurora's room. She kisses Aurora. It doesn't work. And then Laurel's there. And Laurel's like, Alice, what are you doing here? And she's like, what the fuck are you doing here, Laurel? And you find out that Laurel has been King Tarkin's spy. But actually, no. She was Endelwild's spy. And, like, there was, like, a weird, like, for a moment I thought they were going to be lovers, but then she was just, like, a servant.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought the implication was that they were, but it might have just been me shipping them in my head.
I too shipped them, which is a weird thing to do, but I too shipped them. No, when she first bloomed and got her powers, he put her in Lavender House to watch But they've had conversations, but I, as much as that was a vibe, it was not confirmed in the text. um anyway, and she's like, so I've been watching you, and then she's like, you're the one who told them I was going to run away and why my gold got stolen, you terrible person. And then she was like, why would you betray me? Why would you take Aurora away from me? You knew where we were in love. You knew I broke her curse the first time. And she was like, you got her cursed. And Aurora, Alice is like, it was an accident. I didn't do it on purpose. And she's like, that's the second time you've told me that you've done something. You can't control yourself. You don't know what you're doing. Your plan was shit. I was a fool to go along with it. Because what Laurel wants is for the Graces to be freed from the Grace system. And Endelwild promised her, if you help me free Aurora and get her away from Alice, I will free the Graces. Everything you want, check, we'll do it. And because what they have done, not only have they made it so she has to kiss someone else, or somebody else has to kiss her to make her wake up, but they've made it so that when she wakes up, she will only remember Alice as an evil Vila. And she's like, you have literally taken the one person I loved, the one thing that made me happy. Why would you do that? And Laurel was like, this was my choice. You guys were fucked. She was literally, by following your plan, she was dying. And she was like, listen, you played a bad hand. I'm betting on the horse that I think will win and get us what we need, and still allows Aurora to be alive and happy. And Alice gets so mad at her, and they kind of get into a fight, and then Alice just kills her.
That was the moment where I was like, oh, wow. Did I mishear that? Because for a minute, what I thought it was that she had taken away Laurel's power and ended her life that way. And then I was like, no, I think she actually killed her. That's like a moral event horizon in TV tropes talk of like, you don't come back from that. And that was the point where I was like, oh, this book is going to go hard.
Also, I should specify, Laurel's the one who specifically altered Aurora's memories. So people are trying to get in, and Alice kills Laurel. She's splayed out on the ground. She grabs Aurora and starts walking through the halls. And as people are seeing her, she's just snuffing out their magic. Dead, dead, dead. And by snuffing out their magic, it's their life force. At the heart of every human is a bead of magic, the soul, their life force. She's just, people are dying. She's leaving a wake of bodies. She goes to the library, the old, musty, dirty library where they had their first night. She lays Aurora down, and she starts building vines, thorny vines around the outside, because people are trying to hack in, and she's building up a defense. She lays next to Aurora, thinking about all the times they had and the situation and how it sucks, and she sees some dragons on her collar, and she's like, you know what, fuck yeah, we're gonna do that. She jumps out of the tower. She puts Aurora in like a protected box that she crafts. She jumps out and she makes herself dragon wings, and she just starts, like, she doesn't turn into a full dragon, which I would have preferred. She's kind of half dragon, half Vila, just flying around, nuking people, killing people.
She thinks about Lavender House, blows it up. She has a moment where she thinks of like the one nice person in the village and like,
sorry, Hildy.
And then just like still burns it down. And then her Kestrel flies up to her and is like, yeah, we're finally going Grand Theft Dragon.
There's two things I don't like about this. Number one, her Kestrel, when she was arrested, the royal guards fucked up her rooms and destroyed a lot of stuff. And during that, her animals got away. So she doesn't know if Callow was alive, if Callow was killed, none of that. But she finds Callow flying and doing a thing. The thing is, earlier, it was specifically mentioned that she had found Callow as a chick. She was injured. She tried nursing her back to health, and she wanted to release Callow back into the wild. But Callow had, her injured wing never healed enough that she could fly. How the fuck is Callow flying around? Not only is she flying around, she goes to help Alice fuck people up. Just like clawing at people, pecking their eyes out kind of thing. But anytime Alice used her shifter magic earlier, or her magic intensely, Callow did not like it and stayed away from her and was terrified. Why, out of nowhere, is this suddenly your, like, attack bird who's completely okay, like, on your shoulder, nuzzling against your neck, despite every other scene where you used magic or shifter magic around this bird, and it was terrified out of its little mind? This is one of those ways in which it feels like a younger person wrote this, because it's one of those details where, like, you had the image in your head of the ending, and then somewhere along the line during the writing, it didn't work out that way, but we still kept that ending because that's what it looked like.
And it takes away the Kestrel Callow as, like, an actual useful literary instrument of either the bird should be dead, which pushes her more towards this destructive route, or the bird should reject her, and that should be a rejection of the moral stance she has taken by destroying everybody.
Because that would have been a beautiful scene of her finding Callow and Callow being like, go away, squawk, squawk, you know? And then her being like,
Because we've
no.
talked before too about how, like, when you have an amoral character as the viewpoint character, an evil character as the viewpoint character, you have to have other people to show that what they're doing is bad. And
Mhm.
your Kestrel being like, yeah, I don't really like you anymore, that would have been significantly better, I think.
So much better.
She burns the city. And the thing about it is this sequence goes really hard, especially because you're just not expecting. I was not expecting this to be the end of the book. To go, she burns the entire city. She sees ships fleeing in the distance, and she's like, I'm going to protect Aurora from everyone who comes at me forever. And like all this, like, and the thing about it is that the voice actress does a wonderful job here because she's growing more and more crazed in her voice, and it's getting closer and closer to how she actually would use like the villains' voices, like Cal or Morgana's or Grand Moff Tarkin's, and like it's really cool. I hadn't realized it until near the end, but like it's such a rush of intensity.
The book basically ends with that. Like, she's burning everything down. She's going to build her own new dark kingdom and protect Aurora forever. And I would have preferred it if that's how the book ended, because then you can just take what you know of the fairy tale and just be like, ah, this is how we ended up at the point where the fairy tale prince comes in, and maybe it wasn't a prince, maybe it was a princess who comes around, but like you can just autofill it. But there is a second book. I don't think I'm going to read it. I was reading some summaries and some reviews about it, and the direction it goes is not the direction I would prefer stuff to go in.
The thing is, it's weird because in terms of quality, I wouldn't be opposed to reading a sequel. Like, again, I didn't find the first two halves of this book great, but that last third or two fourths, like, I was kind of sold. And I am sort of interested in what happens next, but like,
I'd read it for the sake of the channel, because it could be interesting. Like, if it's not good and we don't like it, that's good for views.
not always. It's a sequel.
It's
Sequels
not.
always do
People don't
terrible.
like sequels.
But I agree with you. I think this is such a great way to get to the beginning of the story tale. What I thought was going to happen is like, okay, Aurora goes to sleep, and then Alice has to go away to like train with Morgane and then come back with skills to wake her up. But it was like, no, we're going straight to the beginning. And also, we're burning the entire cast of characters that we've been building this entire book. That I did not expect at
No,
all.
it was really intense. I didn't love it. Was a very quick descent into, like, here's the thing. She has made a lot of choices that haven't gone great, but all of her choices, she's been trying to do the right thing. Like, she hates that she curses things for people. She hates that that's what people come to her for. She doesn't like it. Um Everything she tries to do is generally morally on the good side of things. There's a couple of gray things, but there's never moments where you're like, ah, there's that black heart beneath it. And so it kind of pulls a little bit of a Forest of a Thousand Lanterns, where it's once she has Morgana inside her,
Yeah.
Morgane, whatever, that she really starts like tipping over the edge.
What's weird is that I feel like it is, or it just didn't bother as much. It did feel more organic than a Forest of a Thousand Lanterns.
It did. It felt way more organic than a Forest of a Thousand Lanterns.
I think also because it was less detailed and intense in terms of the tone it was going for than a Forest of a Thousand Lanterns. That the heel turn. The thing is, her turn makes logical sense, but it doesn't necessarily make emotional sense for her to go that hard into I'm killing everyone.
The burning of the city, had she killed like Laurel and like a couple people on her way out, and like killed the king, and just like done that kind of stuff, like, and just like decimated like 30 people maybe on her way out, that's where I thought it was going. Literal capital side, like I was not expecting.
Mass murder. And like in the sequel, how is she gonna walk that back? Like you are now the character is now a mass murderer.
From what I heard, from what I read, the sequel takes place 100 years. Like, it's Aurora's been asleep for 100 years. A human rolls up on, like, and it's become like the new Vila Kingdom Part 2. She's got a dark court.
I hear there are goblins.
Shifters, goblins, other Vila come to this place. But then a human washes up on shore. That human is, I think, the one that breaks Aurora's curse. And then apparently there's a period where the two of them just argue, fight, and are estranged. So some people really, really loved it, but there was a couple of reviews that were like, "Ooh, the relationship." Like, by at a certain point, I was rooting for the other. There's apparently another female character that Alice, who takes the name Namora, because she asks Morgana what the name of the very first Vila who created Maltair was, and she's like, she says it to her, and then she says it out loud, and she's like, Namara. And so I'd be interested to actually see how it plays out. Some people were saying that by the time, like, they just didn't like Alice or Aurora, and they didn't ship them anymore as a couple, and that there was another side character they shipped more with Alice, and like that I might be interested in looking into.
I've said this before on the channel. Books aren't like movies. Like if I wanted to watch the sequel to this, that's 2 hours of my life. If I listen to this at double speed, it's like 8.
And apparently that one's longer.
So it's like one of these things where like I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but because sequels don't do well, and unless this video does really well or something
Yeah, if
like
this video
that.
does really well and you guys want us to, and if you want us to, you have to do lots of comments requesting it, and lots of likes. Otherwise, we're not doing it.
Nope. Also, you have to join our Patreon and give us money, and then specifically say I joined this Patreon so that you guys would do book 2 of the Lesbian Maleficent series.
If 15 of you join our Patreon and say it was because you want us to do Misrule, we'll do it.
Actually, it only takes about 3 of you guys in terms of ad money. But anyway, for like half this book, I was like, I don't know what we're going to talk about. Like, I don't dislike this, but I don't know what we're going to talk about. Then the last half and last fourth happens, and I was like, oh wow, that really turned around my view of this book as a whole.
It really did.
Yeah, because it's like it really is how you remember the book now, and it really changes a lot of what goes up into it.
It was way more engaging in that last half, man.
It really was, and I really liked it more. And so I don't know, I might check out something else by the author. That might be kind of interesting. I don't know if this is her first work or not, because she's not untalented, and I do like how just balls to the wall she went at the end. I think if you are kind of okay with a little bit more juvenile of a tone, then this book is actually pretty okay for you. And again, I don't mean that as a bad thing, but like if you're more for all young adult books for young adults than for 30-year-old women, then I think this book is.
I also made a point earlier to Will when we were reading this that I think this book would have been stronger and more impactful had it been in third person with a little bit of distance to the main character. There's a couple of scenes, like there is this one scene where she comes back from the ball and she just sobs and cries and just like has this huge cathartic moment. And had it just been described, watching her have this huge all fall down, this like intense reaction, but it's overshadowed by the inner monologue of what she's thinking and how she thinks. And I think a lot of this book would have worked really well and been a little bit more atmospheric if we hadn't been in her head so much, and had it been third person with a little, not a ton of distance, like not Kushiel's darts level of distance, but a bit of distance,
A bit of a remove.
There's a lot of things where I think the scene itself, like, so if it was a TV show or a movie, I think it would be incredibly impactful. It's kind of and not that this is like that at all, but a lot of people have said that the 50 Shades of Grey movie are better because you don't have Anastasia's inner monologue. And now, granted, Alice's inner monologue is not that bad at all. She's very tolerable. I just think the book would have been, and she's fine. She's fine. I think the book would have been stronger had it been in third person, pulled back a little, because I think the scenes could have played out a little bit more organically without everything she's bringing to it. And I think that would have been really interesting.
I feel like it also probably would have felt a little less chatty and conversational and maybe a little bit more real. All right, so that's the book. Again, didn't hate it. Again, it was actually very interesting. It was kind of like an interesting book to read versus all the really mediocre books we've been reading lately. Like we said, hit the like button, comment if you want us to read the sequel, join our Patreon because we do have one. You can join our Discord, which is full of all these super cool, awesome, sexy people.
It's so awesome, so sexy, so cool.
And we also do have a book club where we do a live stream of 2 books a month, one of which you guys get to pick. So pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a good time. You guys should join.
All right, bye.
Bye.